In this episode, you're going to meet Jenn Johnson, who is a dedicated nurse with over 16 years of experience in emergency rooms across Northern and Southern Ontario, Canada. A frontline worker through the most challenging times, Jenn has witnessed firsthand the intense pressures of the profession, from life and death moments to the struggles of coping during the pandemic. A passionate advocate for nurse well-being, her new book, Nursing Intuition, was written to support her peers by offering insights on how to reconnect with the love of nursing and foster resilience in a rapidly changing healthcare environment. She's also a wife and mother of two. And what I love about this episode is we talk about that intersection of intuition with creativity and that neuroscience within that allows you to be self-expressive in your own career. And it's an important topic because intuition is that art of medical care. So listen into this conversation. And if this is your first time here, hi, my name is Dr. Lara Salyer. I am a former burned out physician turned mentor and coach for overworked healthcare professionals looking to catalyze their inner spark and spirit. I believe in a world where doctors flourish inside and outside the exam room by redefining the practice of medicine as a self-expression of their own unique healing art. If you're ready to step into your highest creative power and transform your practice, this channel is for you. Let's paint your work-life masterpiece. Subscribe, and together we will color outside the lines. I'm so excited to invite Jenn Johnson to the Catalyst Podcast. Welcome, Jenn.
Thanks, Dr. Lara. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. And I know we are recording this during Hurricane Helene, right? So
Mama's
thank
first
you.
hurricane.
Yeah, you're first. Yay, you got that box checked, and you're not floating away right now. So we're just going to keep talking.
We're cool so far. We're cool
right?
so far.
That's good. It must mean that you have such good intuition that you're safe. You know you're okay.
It's fine. We're just going to hang by the pool. We're going to order a drink, and then we'll hopefully go over to the airport and go again.
Nice. Well, speaking of intuition, that is why we're talking. You have written an amazing book, From Burnout to Breakthrough, Jenn Johnson's Guide to Nursing Intuition. And I love when people talk about these softer skills in the art of medicine, such as intuition, things like creativity and the neuroscience of flow and interoception, all of these wonderful skills that make you a great healer and very self-expressive. So I'm so thankful you took time out of your busy weekend and came to talk to us here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your very first catalyst moment?
The easiest catalyst moment is obviously COVID. COVID, for all that it did that was negative, I try my very best to look at the silver linings, however small, however minute that they may be. There's always a silver lining if you look hard enough. So with COVID, working at the bedside in the ER, burned out so hard, getting no sleep. Our kids were 4 and 5 at the time. My husband was also essential. So he was also working day shift. I swapped to straight nights. And so I'd stay up all day with the kids and then go to work all night, and then stay up with the kids all day and then go to work all night. And I was lucky if I'd be able to get naps here, there, and everywhere, but they were small enough that you really couldn't nap without them getting into something. So didn't realize how much sleep quality or sleep in general was just so integral to health and wellness and mental wellness. So that it really set me up for burnout. And so when I had a moment of finally breaking and reaching out for help and getting on the antidepressants that I probably should have been on the whole time, it led me to this moment of, there were attorneys who at the time when everything started, they offered to do our wills for free. And so when you hear that, you can't help but go, oh, I'm not expected to survive this. Okay, holy cow. All right. So you went into the beginning of COVID with this kind of mindset that you are going to be sick. You are not going to survive. So a lot of us, there was no sick time because we all showed up. You showed up, you did your shift, you didn't do more, you didn't do less, you just showed up. And then if you were we saved our sick time because we didn't know if we were going to be intubated or not. So we saved it. But getting through and getting to a point where things were kind of calming down a little bit, you're going like, if I were to not survive, how do you explain this to a 4 and 5 year olds, when as they're growing up, and how do you say that mom chose to go in when this was the risk? And so started to think like, okay, well, maybe I'll leave them with some of my really, really good nursing stories, the times that I helped, the times that I got the save, the time that I knew what I was doing. And writing those very obviously led to the very not so great stories, the darkness, the losses, the things that I hadn't dealt with that I really should have. And going through those stories and working through them, it's like, okay, well, what's this thread? This thread of like trusting your gut that you see if you actually follow it through the stories, you're like, holy cow, like, well, that's kind of crazy. Like, all right, thankfully I had one professor in fourth year who said one time, trust your gut. And that was it. That was the whole conversation. And so going back, I'm like, okay, trust your gut. Well, look at all these different stories and how they line up. So I'm like, all right, well, what if there was science behind it? Because obviously I can't bring this forward and talk about it really openly until the science is behind it. So went on a lark and looked for the peer-reviewed scholarly articles to say, no, there is science. And there was so much science. Like I can't even explain to you like 20 years worth of so much science, and not just science around intuition, but science around specifically intuition in nursing. And I lost it. I was like, okay, clearly it's there. Universe is saying this is it. I need to start talking about it. So wrote the book and put all the stories together and linked in all the intuition portions and the education and how to trust your gut and what it might feel like and all these kind of things. And then I sat there, and in 6 weeks that's all poured out of me, and I'm like, it's a book. Like it's a book. I'm like, okay, so applying to publishers and getting it accepted by a publisher. And then 2 years after waiting for it, then they said that they're going to go back to physiotherapy books. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. It's here. It's now. I can update it with more information over the last 2 years. And like, let's get this out. It's been enough time. I've been talking about just my coworkers for 2 years. They're very tired of me talking about it. And so here we are. It's been 2.5 years, almost three by the time I wrote it. And October 29th, it's happening. It's coming out. We've got I say we, like it's a team. It's me. I've got the pre-order is up for sale. And with NurseCon, where I was this week, we've been able, again, I have been able to get to top new release, both in nursing education as well as patient and physician education. So I'm trying not to lose it and ball all over the place, but it's happening and it's coming out, and I'm so excited, a little scared, a lot of scared about how it will be received, because obviously I'm not going to appease everybody, but the science is there, my stories are there. So now let's just get talking about it. The whole idea is
Yes.
just to get talking about it
No,
and
I
bring it
love
from
that.
that 3 a.m. conversation out into an everyday conversation.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I have a question. Have you ever left a review for a show? I would love to hear what you think, and your honest review will help others find us. It would mean so much to me if you just took a moment and did that today. I read each and every one, and I truly incorporate your feedback into these episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to coloring outside the lines with you next time. It sounds like you've done a very thoughtful job pulling some of that hard science into that field of intuition that, again, is part of the art of healing, the art of medicine. And as medicine has progressed into this algorithmic, very checkbox, robotic feeling,
Yes.
and that is certainly needed in times of critical catastrophe like COVID, or in an operating room. We do rely on our systems of cross balances and checks, but then there comes a time when we need to also honor the intuitive guide that we all have, that somatic awareness. We are trained out of our interoception in medicine. Interoception is that ability to feel your organs and what your body's telling you. And we're literally trained not to. We're trained to hold our bladder, to hold our hunger, to just wait and put ourselves on the back burner. And COVID was such a huge challenge for everybody like yourself. And I love that you're coming forward and taking this and saying, wait, we could do this better as nurses. We could look to turn into our intuition and rely on this skill and train it up. It helps combat, burnout, as you know, right? Burnout is
Yeah.
three things: depersonalization, like you don't see yourself in this mission at all; low perceived achievement, you're not making progress anymore; and then emotional exhaustion, which you and your husband were suffering in COVID. Emotional exhaustion because you had no way to have good sleep. You were really off kilter. So it's like the perfect recipe of burnout. And what you're doing is giving people a solution to look at replenishing themselves with a skill that is something we don't talk about very much in medicine. So,
No.
what would you say is that role of intuition in nursing? How do you define when people use that, or what would you recommend to a nursing student who's listening to this podcast right now?
Yeah. I mean, we all have intuition and we are all already using it and we all know it very, very well. Any female, you've been trusting this feeling since at least 12, if not potentially earlier. You walk across the street and there's a guy there. Nope. And it's just that automatic, got tenses, a horrible heaviness, like that, just a feeling of nope. And it's just a closed off, you feel it. And it's visceral and it's not something that you're producing of awareness. You're just following it and you're trusting it without question. You walk into a room, you see a bunch of people, somebody introduces you to somebody, and you're shaking their hand. You're like, "Hi, I'm Jen, and how's it going?" And you're like, "Nope." Like, you seem like a nice person. You're dressed well, your hair is done, everything's nice, nice, nice. No, there's something about you, whether it be your personality or whatever else, there's just something. And again, being vague, that's okay. When I go to my docs and I say, like, "Hey, I don't know about Mrs. Smith, she's in room 6," like, there's something, about it. And it's very hard to describe. So it's, you're coming at it and you talk to your doctor, like, "Hey, the vitals are okay. They look okay, but there's just something." And the docs that I work with, again, the ER, they know me and they know that when I say that, don't take it lightly, because I don't do it every shift. I definitely sometimes will go weeks without doing it. But
Mhm.
every now and again, I will stop and either I'm walking down the hall, see somebody, and just the way they look or something, I'm just like, "Boop, no." And you stop and you just stop walking, and stopping in a walking nurse pace is very hard to do. You just like slam on the brakes and you're like, "What is happening here? I don't understand what's going on. I need more information about this." And so going to my physicians and saying, like, "Hey, is there any way you can just take another peek at Mrs. Smith? Or, here's some things that I'm noticing. What do you think? She's up on the cardiac monitor. What do you think of the rhythm? I don't know." And again, me being able to say, "I don't know," is such a skill in its own, because we want to have the answers as nurses. We want to, try and let people understand where we're coming from. But intuition is this great thing where enough of us are doing it and enough of us have trusted it, where you go to your physician or your coworkers and you go, "I just don't know about XYZ." And they go, "Okay, well, let me take a peek at it." Or like, "What's really tripping you up? Like, is there something specific?" And being able to talk to your support people about that is huge. That's the big skill. Like, that's all I'm asking for, is that people just not only recognize that it's happening, but then being able to do something about it.
Yeah, that's
So
important. Having that conversation with your colleagues in an open space and not being scared of saying, "Well, I just have a hunch," right?
yes,
And
yes,
I love that this guide will help nurses look to have that solidarity. There's so many bridges to cultivate your intuition, whether it's meditation, whether it is, routine reflecting. And in my sphere, it's creativity. It is that conversation that you have with your inner child. When you start to become creative, you start to train up that intuition. You start to train up those skills of knowing when something doesn't feel right and when something feels like you're on the right path, because it won't lead you astray, as you have, shown in your book. Intuition is a powerful tool in every, doctor's kit, in every nurse's coat pocket,
yeah,
having that intuition. And the more you use it and rely on it, the better it gets to be sharpened as a tool, amongst all the other tools. So if somebody's listening, what would you recommend that they start with if they're trying to cultivate some intuition in their nursing career?
yeah. So just when you're going around and you're seeing your patients, if you have that niggling feeling of like, oh, maybe something's not right, all I want you to do is just give it 2 seconds before you kind of brush it off. Just sit there and ask yourself, okay, well, why? Why is this happening? Why am I kind of being triggered? Is it that I'm thinking that something's wrong? Am I seeing something's wrong? Is my gut kind of like all over the place and all of a sudden like heavy and not feeling very great? What is it that is stopping me in this moment? And truly, even if you were to be trying to do it, it's going to take practice. Just like any skill in life, it takes practice and it's going to take time to be able to hone it a bit. But if you can just acknowledge the feeling and then, you want more science, the science says if you are to take that and take it to your doc and the doc comes in and sees your patient, even if you're wrong, which granted, we're all wrong all the time, it's fine. But just having the doc come and reassess that patient, that interaction alone will still increase good patient outcomes. So you're still doing well for your patient. You're still advocating. You're still learning, and your patient's going to have a better outcome, even with you being maybe wrong this time. But what about next time? What about next time when you say like, "Hey, I'm just not sure." The doc comes in and goes, "Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that they looked like this or were acting like this or were breathing like this. Like maybe let's do a little bit more blood work. Let's try another medication. Let's do some more investigations to see what's really going on here." So again, you're going to get there. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of trust. And if you can find that person on your unit, whether it be a charge nurse or just another senior nurse who starts talking about, oh, I trusted my gut. Oh, I called that one. Listen for those key words and then just ask, well, but what did it feel like? What did you do about it? And what was the outcomes? Like teach, like tell me the story, because we all love to tell stories. And when we're right, we really love to tell stories. So ask, just ask like, hey, when was the last time you had a really good catch? When was the last time you trusted your gut? When was the last time you advocated for your patient without really knowing what you were advocating about? And those stories will come up and learn from them for sure.
I love that, especially, that was my favorite in medical school and in residency is I loved finding the nurse that has been there for decades. And I would follow her or him and I would just watch. And oftentimes the best clinicians aren't the ones that can sit there and only rely on the data in front of them. I mean, that's important, but they're the ones that, I loved learning from them. The old country doc that said, oh yeah, this is how I stitch things up, or here's how I distract the kid while I'm giving vaccinations, or here's what all these little things and tricks. And that those charge nurses or those nurses that have been doing this for decades, I loved asking, well, what do you mean you have a hunch? Or tell me what, and it was great for them because then they got to dip into that intuition and define it. Because oftentimes it's undefinable. It's a sensation, it's a feeling, and you're like, I don't know. But they got that experience. So it's a benefit win-win for both sides. As you're learning to cultivate your intuition, asking those that are experts, it gets them a chance to pause and go, well, why did I? Well, actually, it was because of the way they had their body language or the way that, their skin looked cast in a different light in that, or whatever. And it gets you that information of watching other people and how they use their intuition. And it's such a fun little, it's like a Yoda, like what's going on? It kind of feels a little Star Wars, little Jedi, but
A little bit.
it's there. The science shows, we all emit energy in EMF fields. We all have this effective, contagious energy on each other. And we can be attuned to other people's energy in a way that can't be felt or seen with our eyes or ears, but you sense it. And that can save someone's life. And so if you're listening and, I'd rather be wrong. I'd rather have somebody go, man, I don't see it. Okay, that's fine. I'm off, but,
That's cool.
don't think that you're bad at this. This is a constant, reshaping and polishing of that tool. And I love that you're bringing that to light with your book. You also have some journals as well, right?
I do. So we were talking earlier about the soft skills and, intuition's a very soft skill. How do you teach intuition? Well, it's one of those things that just takes time and effort and validation and practice. Same with like grief. Like, so I've got a grief journal and because how many patients myself, I don't know how many patients I've touched. I don't know. I couldn't even guesstimate how many, deaths I've been present for. no idea, could not even guesstimate. And, how do you get to a point where it's like, well, am I allowed to grieve for a stranger that I only knew for 30 minutes while we were trying compressions and trying to resuscitate? Like, how do I come to terms with the loss of somebody who was very similar to myself? How do I cope with the loss of a kid? Um, you know, and we're very often not taught, but kind of told, like, oh, you just shove it down and you just kind of like don't deal with it. And like even writing the book, like there were patient deaths that happened while I was a student 17 years ago that I did not, like, I had processed a little bit of it, but I had not processed really fully, truly as much as I should have. And so going back into these stories and revisiting, and then it's you know, all of the emotions come back up and you're going like, okay, I'm going to deal with it. And like, what else happened? And what did I see? And what did I feel? And what were they saying? It's a way to kind of bring forward a lot of, grief is a very large part of our jobs that we do not talk about.
Yeah,
So
and
the
grief
journal,
is actually the signature brainwave pattern, the same as burnout. Grief and burnout are the same under a functional MRI.
really,
So yeah, so it's part of our career. Unfortunately, when 63% of healthcare workers are burned out, I mean, they're suffering grief and they're going to work grieving every day.
yeah,
As far as their reality is far different than what they expected, and that's what grief is a mismatch, right, of their
yeah,
reality. And I love that you're helping them through that. That grief journal could be used in so many different ways.
yeah. It's not just like, empty pages where a lot of us feel very overwhelmed with empty pages. So, it's just prompts here, there, and everywhere. How are you feeling today? How is that death potentially bringing forward something that's a little bit more closer to home, and that's why it's hitting harder. Um, Learning about how we can start talking about grief and breaking it down into little teeny tiny chunks, about, how am I feeling about this? Am I having physical symptoms that are associated with this? Is it changing how I'm sleeping and all these other things? And then enough room to journal about 5 patient deaths, and kind of give you that open-endedness where you can talk about it and it's a safe space, it's your own space. And so when you're grieving, like, it gives you somewhere to talk about it, because many of us do have spouses that are also in medicine,
Mhm.
but sometimes we don't. And so, you don't want to burden your spouse, especially if they're nowhere near medicine and they can't quite understand that, how are you getting emotionally involved with somebody who you've known for 15, 20, 30 minutes,
Right.
and then having their reality impact yours in such a way. So it's a nice way to kind of decompress and get it out on paper instead of just shoving it down, because clearly shoving it down for the majority of us is not working.
Well, yeah, and what you're doing is you're giving medicine to that polyvagal, sense, the vagus nerve, that sense of feeling safe and calm and grounded is not easy to do in the practice of medicine when you're on the front lines, certainly not during COVID. And part of that medicine is that sixth vital sign of creativity, which you've beautifully done. Therapeutic creative writing, therapeutic journaling is that medicine for our soul, for our grief, for our burnout by connecting, people to this valuable tool and practicing that sixth vital sign, and helping people learn that this therapeutic writing can heal a lot of that trauma and get them out of that, fight or flight sympathetic overdrive and drive into more of a dorsal vagal grounded state is so wonderful and a gift to many healthcare workers. I love all your work. Where can people find you if they want to purchase some of your journals or recommend your book?
Yeah, so actually all of the journals and my book is currently on Amazon. So if you search up either Jennifer A. Johnson, RN, or intuitive nursing, or nursing intuition, sorry, or grief journals, I should pop up. Usually the easiest way is just Jennifer A. Johnson, and then you can look at all my books, and a bunch of them are the same. They just have different covers because everybody's a little different. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at ernurse.jenn, Jenn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Johnson, BSCRN. Do not come for me. Do you know how many Jennifer Johnsons there are? There's so many. So I had to use the full, credentials, blah, blah, blah. And you can also find me at rxforgrowth.com, so prescriptionforgrowth.com, which is my personal website, and can help you out with vent sessions and just, helping. The whole point of all of this is really just to, if I can help one person just get through the moment to get on to the next, that's all I'm hoping for. We're all suffering, we're all struggling. The hardest thing is to lean on somebody else and ask for help as a nurse, because that's what we're supposed to do. Is we're supposed to help us, like we're supposed to help others, not to help ourselves. So please, by all means, reach out and be happy to talk to anybody about what they're going through.
That's beautiful. No doubt. I'm going to put all those links in the show notes. And before we close, I love to ask all my guests your sixth vital sign of creativity. In other words, what would you be doing as an 8-year-old on a free Saturday if I could go back in time? What was your favorite thing to do?
Oh, just watch cartoons and doodle. Like,
Yay!
the cartoon lineup from like that you actually had to get up at 8 a.m. to get onto the Cartoon Network and watch all the cartoons lined up, and on my stomach, legs up, kick in, and just goofing
Love
off and
it.
doodling.
What
Yeah.
was your favorite doodle? I loved doodling Garfield. Did you have any favorite doodles that you like to do?
I was only half decent at drawing mice.
Nice.
Like just little outlines. I had a few mice growing up, and they were my little buddies. So
Oh,
it explains the Cinderella connection so hard. And so just doodling little mice and little
that's
mice,
awesome.
little mouse.
Okay, well, I hope you doodle some more mice in Orlando before you
I
leave the
should. I should.
mouse capital of the world. So, thanks again, Jenn Johnson. It's been a pleasure. And everybody, check out the show notes and get a hold of her book and her journals. Recommend it to some of your colleagues. You never know who you can change in their life. And until next time, keep practicing that sixth vital sign of creativity and coloring outside the lines, everybody.